Joe Rogan and Jensen Huang. Jensen shares a story where he says, I wake up every day with anxiety because he feels that he's still 30 days away from bankruptcy.
There is a wall that we thought that the hustle that we were taught to keep going and keep doing, and we actually haven't spent the time to stop and really think about who told me to hustle. What is the meaning of this? What am I hustling for?
Hey everyone, welcome to the Awaken Diaries podcast, where each week we have the privilege to sit with sages, entrepreneurs, and experts from various fields to learn about different tools and ideas that can help us understand ourselves deeply and grow in the realms of health, wealth, and relationships. Today's episode is a pretty special episode because I think it relates a lot to our daily life, especially when we think about the voices in our heads. A lot of the times what we realize is that 90% of the thoughts are limiting beliefs, no matter if it's fears or if it's what ifs or if it's judgment to someone. And unconsciously, that really limits our potential in loving ourselves and also loving others. So what we're going to be discussing in this podcast is helping you find some tools and strategies to allow you to understand how to discriminate between the mind and the ego judging something, and also what is actually authentic, what actually you feel on the inside. So then you can start living more towards that natural self and become more fulfilled and happy. And in today's podcast, I'm also super honored to be joined along by two of my good friends, Colin Wee, who's an entrepreneur who recently sold his wine business and now is running a regenerative clinic in Malaysia, which is super cool. And also Ryion, who's the author of Awaken Purpose and a conscious AI builder. So how this podcast will run is, in the beginning, you'll get a little taster on where Colin and Ryion is coming from regarding their background of personal development. And you'll most likely hear some tools that you may not be that familiar with. And not to worry, because after the 20-minute mark, we actually begin to explain these tools. And what's most important is grasping the insights and the understanding that comes from these tools and really integrating it into your life, so then you can start becoming more fulfilled and live on your potential. So without further ado, happy listening, and let's get straight into the podcast.
Yeah, so we connected through a mutual friend. Obviously, we are all on a sort of a journey, and we really connected on that self-development part, the self-discovery part, and in particular, we were discussing about human design and gene keys, which I guess we can put a little link below so that people can read a little bit about that. But basically, what I've experienced in my own journey is that these tools, whether it be human design or gene keys or astrology, all these things, what I sense now is just another way to view who you are as a person. Maybe we can use the term the soul. And as a father, as a parent, I see that, in a very direct way. Because when you look at a kid, when they're really young, they already have this uniqueness about them, a distinction. If you have multiple kids, it will be probably even more clear. And sometimes they're even twins, and they still can have different personalities, different core traits. And so for me, using this human design gene keys is basically a way to rediscover the essence of who you are. It's just a potentiality and just a window into who you are. You don't have to take it as the truth, you don't have to take it as a fact, but you can just take it as a suggestion, and it's just showing you something about yourself, and then you are the one who is going to decide whether you want to walk into that thing, or maybe you're not ready yet, and that's fine. But for my own journey, I've tried so many things. I've even got people to do face readings on me just because they're like, Colin, I've met this guy. He helped me for 7 years, and I would really like for you to meet him. And I was like, yeah, I'm curious. I'll try. And I went there, and of course, I've done other stuff like maybe a 八字 reading or something like that. And what I realized is what these guys do, and he said it in a really good way, right? He said that I might be a face reader, but I'm that's not my job. He says his job is to use the tools that he has at his disposal, like face reading, to help motivate, inspire, and encourage his clients, whether they might be NBA players, sports athletes, businessmen. And so when he was speaking to me and telling me all these things about myself, of course I resonated with some more than others, but the real idea is that it's a real way, one of the ways that you can see your potentials, all the potentials, and some of them that you might not even know, might not even realize. And that just gives you um, just opens your possibilities. And I think in this world, especially how we have so many things that are changing, so much uncertainty, this helps us a lot to have some sort of true grounding, right? Because if your core is, it might be very multifaceted, it might be a lot of different things, but at the same time, the core is grounded in something, right? It doesn't sort of move. It can evolve, but it comes from a fundamental base. And if we can know ourselves just a little bit better, that's going to help us in our daily lives. And that's how I've benefited the most from all these things. And, gene keys and human design in particular, they are so there's so much info there. There's so much wisdom there. And, today I might get something from a gene key, and 1 month later I'll get something totally different. It's like how you could read a book, and every time you read it, you might get something slightly different. So for
True,
me,
true.
it's like it's just such a interesting tool, such an interesting modality, and I wish that more people would be exposed to some of this, just so that they can know themselves better. I think in a world where things are changing so much and there's so much uncertainty, um, if you come from a place of knowing, if you come from a place of at least understanding, it's gonna give you such a strong base to move in your life, whichever direction you wish. So that's my experience in a nutshell.
Cool. So maybe I can go next. Um,
Yeah.
actually, I come across metaphysics since I was young because my aunt, who is a feng shui master, and she actually self-learned everything from feng shui to purple stars, from face reading, palms reading, everything. She self-learned because she actually learned it from because she was really good in with Chinese language. So actually read the ancient Chinese, so the ancient book to learn that. So I actually exposed to that when since I was young, but I was actually absolutely against it. And back then it was just really that, like, one, like we are mostly Western trained. It's all about science, and those things make no sense to me. And I just haven't, like, in my mind we're just not able to connect the dots like that for the longest time. Right, until then, I think fast forward when were exposed to human design and gene keys, right? So in probably the past few years, and then suddenly something clicked. And what clicked is that what I noticed in past and now, the big difference is that back then a lot of metaphysics, and even my aunt, actually she doesn't do the fear-based talk, but most of the traditional ways of talk about these type of things is put so much fear into us. Like, so it actually just say I can predict your future, but has never been positioned as a self-knowledge. It's never positioned as a self-improvement tool. It's more like a authoritative person telling you your life sucks, and this is what the 5,000 things that you need to buy to save your life. And that was very like against my belief in the past. But when I opened to when I start learning about human design, and still, yeah, I would say that there is like two camp. One camp of the content creator out there is still a bit of fear based, but majority, and we actually learn and understand um, this type of tool. What I When I actually reflect and contemplate on what the tool was telling me, I found that it's like, oh, now I understand why um, there's area that I struggle and that's area that I thrive. And that actually gives me the language on that makes total sense that why I'm good at what I'm good at and why I'm bad at what I'm bad at. Without the tool, I might continue to push for things that it doesn't flow with me because I thought that's what I supposed to do unconsciously. So I think these two for me the biggest aha moment is that it allows me to it almost like a manual, like a user manual of my own myself to like, oh, okay, that makes total sense now. And I could, and it's still my choice. I can choose to go with the flow. Or I was like, no, actually, I will also choose to challenge the flow, but now it's a conscious decision.
Yeah.
So whichever step it is, that become allow me, it doesn't dictate who am I, but allowed me to consciously to choose my reality. And I think that's where the real realization comes in when I exposed to human design. Then if I and because my background I always like to deep dive and analyze stuff. Then now I layer on the human design back with the more tradition like Eastern tools like Bazi and Purple Star, and it's like, oh, actually they are very aligned in terms of the fundamental of my user manual, right? But then it was just described differently. So if you're removing the noise and how people interpret it, and you kind of like become your own interpreter of the tool, then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, they are quite aligned with who I am. And one tool is like probably 1,000 years old, and one tool is 40 years old, and it's like that is quite for me is quite amazing that like like how can different tool like so far apart in terms of discovery of this tool that have so much similarity, so something going on there, which continue to explore why that is, right? And gene key, using actually the similar structure, right? So for all the tools, it's using a very similar structure of the 64 keys from the hexagram. And then gene key actually layer on so much depth into who I can become, right? And this depth is not that like a fear based saying that you must do X, you must do Y, but really bringing us to a beautiful journey, right? Going to explore and contemplate our fear, our shadow, right? And then into gift, right? Into what can we become. And I think that like 64 keys like become just a um, yeah, almost like there is a different. I kind of almost see it's like a different archetype for all of us to continue to evolve in this beautiful journey. So I do, yeah. So that's why I start like really learn how to use this to consciously, right, and not like and I do see one pitfall sometimes people will fall into, for example, would be especially because of social media. It was like, oh, I am a generator, I must be XYZ. Oh, I'm a projector, I must be XYZ. Oh, I can't do this because I do that. Like so, it kind of go into this loop of looking at the tool to tell you what you cannot be done instead of looking at the tool and tell you what you can be done. So I think that mindset is also very important as we use those tools. Is that um, where do we focus on, and do we focus on how to move us forward, or how but if we don't do that, sometimes I see people, it's like it's become an excuse of how to not act on certain things. So that's kind of like what I wanted to share, is like how the tool can be powerful if we use it consciously, but it also could become um, a blockage for us if we use it negatively.
Yeah, I really like what you both mentioned because I feel like my path was also really similar in terms of like the insights of what I've got in terms of like the options which you've mentioned, Colin, and also the fear-based mode versus the gift mode, as Ryan mentioned. And I actually just want to add a bit of quantum physics here because especially for a lot of us, like we're logical minds, right? We always want to get things science backed. And I've recently been reading a book called A Happy Pocket Full of Money.
Okay.
And this book is a really good book that explains really this whole illusion that we've been living in. And I just want to read like a part of that book, a little quote, um, talking about a subatomic particle is not really a particle in the way that a grain of sand is a particle, while atomic and larger particles are objects or things. Subatomic particles are not objects as such. They are probabilities of existence and at the same time multiple existences. And they are also wave like and particle like at the same time. And what that basically means is our understanding of science has like moved on to the next level. Like we right now, a lot of the times in school, we're taught that things in the most fundamental level are matter. But then there is actually a level beyond matter, which is energy, right? Energy and sounds. And one really unique feature about energy and sounds is that it's always vibrating and it's either vibrating at a high vibration or a low vibration. And you may now ask, like, how does this connect to this whole like self-discovery and personal journey? And what that means, if you think about it, is that we're all made of these energy particles. And that means that we have, as the book said, probability of existence, meaning that we can choose how we react to a certain situation. And there's always like a high vibration in something, there's always a low vibration. And I think that ties really well with these modalities, especially with the gene keys, where they have the three different states. Once you look into it, there's the shadow state, and then there's also the gift state, and there's also the city state. And what you'll start to realize is that all three of these states are fundamentally the same essence, but then they're just expressed in a different form. And one of them is expressed in a lower vibration, another one is in a slightly higher one, and then the city one's in the high vibration. And what this means for us is that we actually have way more free will than what we actually think, because normally the shadow vibration is the things where we victimize ourselves or where we're always fear oriented. But then if we're able to see what the fundamental essence is and what the higher vibration is, so then we can then figure out what resonates with us and tune more into that higher vibration, right? It provides us with the options, with the alternatives whenever we face these circumstances where we're really suffering. And another thing that I've discovered with quantum, I know I'm going on a crazy explanation here, is that a lot of the things that we're seeing in life right now, like around us, if you just look at your your computer or your chair or how you're interacting with someone, is that all of these things are actually the past. Like our understanding of time is really an illusion because if you think about how you interact with someone, how they actually feed back to you is how you interacted with them in the past. So all of the time you're actually just interacting with your past. And how this can be super powerful is that it shows you how you have control of the present moment. And it's all just about the now. So then you can actively change onto the past.
Mm.
No, I really like that. I think, like to add on your last piece of the comment, right, is really, right, if we currently, what our experience is just a experience of our past creation of whoever we were, right? So which means and because we have time space, right, in on Earth, so therefore it has the delay, right? So our current, like whatever we're creating today, right? So three of us, we create this podcast today. Whatever our thoughts comes in today, we know this will be our future. We know that our current consciousness create our future, right? And this future is getting shorter and shorter, right? Which means that the reality will come in faster and faster, right? It's that's just because we have become more aware, right, of this. So I really like that, like you bring in the quantum side of it, because finally, right, like from all the metaphysics that we talk about, actually it is like in a way it is quantum physics, and the quantum entanglement, right, has kind of really like show proof that there is a difference between the form and the wave and attention, right? The quantum physics have focused that when we spend our attention, and only when the attention happen, the wave become forms, right? And then it create certain things. So which means that whatever we focus on now, it will become reality in the near future, and it get easier and easier because we are aware of it, right? So yeah, I really like, I really enjoy bringing back peace back. And I think before quantum physics become like a popular knowledge or like a common knowledge, it is so hard for this type of tools like human design and gene key to have a really solid foundation, right? Because still sound very woo woo, right? But I think aligned with quantum physics, it feels like, yeah, actually, the things start to align, right? So yeah, very happy we are on this path.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know this was going to be a quantum physics discussion, but now I'm getting more excited. But yeah, I'll make some comments as well. I really like what you said. There's also this concept. As you said that, I have this. I just thought of this concept in physics, right? There's this concept of energy states, right? And when, for example, in the process of, like, let's say like a LED, like a diode, when it receives this excitation, it gets into a higher energy state, right? And then, in order to go back to its stable state, it has to release a photon, right? Energy, basically. And so when you were speaking about that, my thought was basically, or my feeling was basically that, that's when we are in high energy state, when we are vibrating at that level, whatever you want to call it, the gift, the city level, or high vibrational state, it is almost natural that you have to give this energy out to others. And when you work on yourself, which is the truest form of self-love, that's only how you can begin to love others in the true way. So yeah,
Yeah, so true, so true.
amazing.
And that self love, I think, is like it kind of lead into like when you're at that highest state of being, like a self love, and it turn into unconditional love, right? Because we have no more lack, uh, and when there's no lack, the only natural state is to gift.
Amazing, amazing. Wow. We need to talk more about physics, I guess. Or at least our brains work that way.
Well, and it's true, especially I think that I was talking to Bosco yesterday too. It's like um especially for men, it feels like that we have this trauma blockage that we can only through the logical route to convince ourselves to touch our heart and our
Mm,
emotion, versus women and girls, they're a lot easier, like naturally, to open that up, because probably like the natural feminine energy is more prominent. Even so, actually, like when I talk to like female clients, actually it's also that they are also driven by masculine energy, which block a lot of this, like opening up this feeling. And I also wonder, like, how does this tool, right, help us, especially men, right, in terms of going within a bit easier and more, like it can go from that logical and soften up that logic into the heart space.
Yeah. I see that. Yeah, I see that. You're right. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting point that you bring up because, especially when I'm going through all of these different modalities, one thing I notice is that it's like the modality itself is really seven centered. And that means that it's still really like mind focused, even though it is showing us how to reconnect back with our authentic self. So at times, there may be particular spheres or particular areas in your life where maybe you're not as spiritually ahead compared to other um, areas of your life. And then sometimes you may feel bad about it, and then your brain will start like judging it. And because you have to act this way, you have to act that way according to all of these different modalities. But then what I've realized is it's more helpful to be the witness, or be the witness of what your body says and kind of let go of your mind, because I think the overall point of these modalities is really to teach us to surrender, because we've been so mind fixated for our entire lives, and we've seen how that have brought, of course, a lot of prosperity. This is how like the whole society was basically built, because someone had to think of some kind of thought in order to build like this chair or to build this computer. But then you could also see how when you lean too much to the spectrum of being so mind fixated, you start to generate all of these illusions, all of these fears, which are not reality, right? These fears, which are just blockages and stopping you from reconnecting with that creative essence within you. I think a really good example I've always thought about was like Steve Jobs, right? Steve Jobs, before he created Apple, he went on a retreat, 8 months in India with monks, and then learning all about these spiritual essence. And then afterwards, you can probably assume that his mind cleared up, right? He's able to free up this creative space, which led him to found Apple, which revolutionizes the world. So eventually, we always have to balance this force of thinking and then also clearing your mind. And really, it's especially, I think, for us hustlers, because we're trying to always build stuff. It's very important to balance both working periods and also resting periods, even though that may sound like, oh, you're letting your guard down. But then through those resting periods, what I found is that it, number one, helps make you be more effective whenever you're working, and number two, you might actually find some insights in stillness that
Yeah.
just automatically gets downloaded to you. So that's, I think, something really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I want to comment on that for sure. Like you brought up that example of Steve Jobs. I love it. Right. So I love that example as well. And what I got from it was that so he went there and he said, if I'm not quoting him directly, but in maybe paraphrase, but he said that where he was brought up, they, the mind or the abilities of the mind is called intellect, right? But then when he went there, he saw another way to use maybe not necessarily the mind in particular, but he called it intuition. He said he learned that, right? And that sort of led him to realize that the best pointer is the finger, right? Right? It sounds so simple. It sounds very intuitive, but in essence, it's genius, right? Also, because he was prepared to question the status quo, right? There was the keyboard, there was the stylus, and he's like, why are we using? Why don't we use something that is natural to all of us, right? So I think there's a wisdom in different ways, and I think what we are touching upon is also not just the mind, right? Clearly, there's other things, right? There's the gut, right? We call it gut feeling. Intuition can sometimes also called gut feeling. So it's coming from somewhere else, right? Doesn't necessarily mean that um, it is right or wrong. But that's not the only tool we have to sense, right? Not just the mind. There's other tools, and maybe the analogy I want to give, which I like, is like it's like a radio, right? Let's say we are a radio, and we are getting information about ourselves from the mind channel, the emotional channel and the soul channel, right? Obviously, if a radio is receiving three frequencies, it's going to be really jumbled up, clearly. So I think we use these tools to basically try to listen to these different channels separately, and then we say, how do we integrate this into a coherent signal, right? That we want to put out in our life. I think that's one of the things that I got. And also, like, you talk about rest. I think that's really critical. Like, that's a critical part, right? Yes, we are all hustling. We all want to create things. We want to build things. And those are not bad things for sure. At the same time, we also innately understand, or at least the body actually knows, when you need rest, right? The mind knows when it needs rest. When you're a little kid, you know that, right? You see a kid, they run around, they play, and then the next moment, they're like, it's time to sleep. It's a non negotiable, right? Of course, as we become adults, we also understand that we can override this signal and we can suppress that signal. And it's like, no, I need to work another 10 hours. Oh, no, I need to grind for the next 2 months. I'm not saying that we should chill and lay back, but just like a professional athlete, they actually part of most of their job is actually to rest and recover, so that they can have peak performance when it is necessary. So if we apply that into our own lives, I suspect, and a lot of the problems that people or we want to solve, they're not problems that are determined by time. They're determined by energy and focus, right? So if we can apply that to our lives, I suspect we'll be doing so much more, and it would seem, at least on the surface level, it would seem more effortless. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I got. Thanks for.
Right. No, what you share, Colin, reminds me of a story that in 1974, there's a Japanese soldier. It was found in the middle of the jungle, that he has continued in this jungle fighting a war that was ended 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And this soldier, finally, the family came and told him that, like, the war has been finished. And then he's like, no, like, he was like really like thinking that it was a propaganda. The family didn't understand, right? And people tried to save him, and then he tried to hide, and then he's thinking that people were going to catch him. And and so psychologists, eventually, try to kind of like study on him. So what happened? Why is this person living in the jungle by himself for 30 years, just because no one told him the war has ended? And so he keep going, right? And like, because what's the belief? Because of the loyalty of that belief, that continue to keep going. And why I want to share this story is actually fairly very similar to why most of us are doing the hustling. There is a wall that we thought, that the hustle that we were taught to keep going and keep doing and keep on doing something, and we actually haven't have time, or like actually spend the time to stop and really think about, what am I hustling for? What is the meaning of this? Who told me to hustle? Right?
Yeah.
And what war are we fighting for? So until we have that pause, that rest, that tool for us to contemplate, we will just keep going. And like this soldier, when we speak to someone that is like in the middle of hustle, actually it's hard to get them out of it,
Yeah.
right? Because it's just like, it for them, it's like, this is my job, this is what I need to do. So it is very interesting until actually like someone come across like a podcast like us, or some other podcast that actually make them think. And I'm really hoping, and actually I have high hope, that with this AI transformation, that like actually like things start moving so fast, that like transforming a lot of the jobs and tasks, people kind of like forced into, it's like, have to stop and ask, what is this about? Why am I doing all this? What's the meaning of it?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I feel that for sure. Yeah, I mean, I have the same, I have the same optimistic thinking as well, right? Things like you said, things are becoming faster, right? Once upon a time, it took years to create a 1 billion dollar business. Now, some of those $1 billion businesses take months, and soon there will be $1 billion businesses, or it's already happened, that are run by one person. So the whole idea of this so-called abundance is coming, right? Whether you like it or not, like you said, some people will be forced to move, forced to change. But I think one of the things that I really want to touch upon was what you said about that, the story about that soldier, right? And one of the things that really affected me a lot was looking at the interview with Joe Rogan and Jensen Huang. And basically, it's about the essence of what we were saying just now, right? Which is about patterns, right? Patterns, or this story we keep telling ourselves. So Jensen shares a story where he says, up to this day, I still think that I wake up every day with anxiety because he says he feels that he's still 30 days away from bankruptcy. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy, right? Like, that's crazy. Like, I'm sure that pattern served him, obviously, no doubt. And for me, what I saw was even beyond him himself, right? Which is the pattern that he has also created in his environment, meaning his children, meaning his family, meaning his the people he interacts with. Like, if we are able to solve these patterns, choose what patterns we that don't serve us anymore, and create new patterns that serves us, because it comes from deep within, right? We are not only going to help ourselves, we're going to help the people around us, right? The people that we love the most. So for me, it's really a strong tool, right? To be aware. I think the tools are there to begin this awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think awareness is a very key word here, right?
indeed.
Yeah. I think we dive deeper into that topic that you brought up on pattern breaking. I've been
Mm,
really looking more into like how habits form, and this really dives more into the emotional level because a lot of the times we're reacting to something because of emotions rather than our logic, even though sometimes we think that our logic actually overrides. So there's something very interesting which you can start observing in your life is that if there is some kind of habit which you start falling into a lot, rather than only looking at like the times when you fall into the habit, you should actually dive one level deeper and try and find that emotion or that desire that you have, because most of the time there's definitely some kind of like similar emotion, similar desire. And what you can do with that is you can interrupt it, right? Interrupt it by, rather than either falling into the emotions, you replace it with something else, or you figure out what that emotion means in a higher state. How can you express this as like as a form of creativity or as a form of higher service, right? Like serving the other, for example. Like one thing that I found out that I really like a lot is really this state of like loving someone or being like really innocent and really having this playful essence, right? And I can take this in one end where I'm going to continue doing things that are just only serving myself, such as like playing video games and things like that. Or I can take it on the other hand where I can create something beautiful with that. And what I found is um, I'm able to project this creativity onto playing instruments, specifically the piano, and like playing these songs and then performing it to others. So then you can spread the love to more people, right? And really open up. So again, it goes back down to finding that essence, which I think is really powerful with all of these modalities and all of these different sharings and stories that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And like when you talk about using a tool like what you're passionate about to share with others, and naturally is actually sharing that love. I found that no, like it reminded me that one of my aha moments is that if you think about why ethics and singer and artists, they are actually like they they make most of the money, right? Their reward is high, but like the most authentic one, like Kobe Bryant, like, and like, some really good singer in the world, they really just they're not even thinking about how do I spread love in like as a mission, but what they try to do is like how do I optimize, how do I be the best of self, and people around these people cheers for them being their best, and them being their best is actually like, and the reward of them being the best become like, um, wealthy, and this external validation, to support that. So it always like kind of like, if you really think about it, it's not that they are lucky, or yes, they have the talent, but it's all of us have the talent. Like not all of us can be Kobe Bryant, but all of us have our own talents, that if we can express that best talent of what we have, that innate talent, right? And I think like that will actually is the most efficient way to attract and be abundant in life. And yeah, so that's kind of like one of my aha that I see, that and all this self help, or not help, like self knowledge too, and awareness, and acceptance of who we are, like is kind of like, is to help us to get there. And even like all these like ethics and singer, they are not, we only see their success, but behind the scene there's also through the struggles, through the dark side, like through a lot of pain, to get there. So I think that is, become very clear to me, that how like they might not need this tool because they know, like somehow, so some people, and some people that those two are helpful
Yeah.
to get there.
Just
Yeah.
adding on to this on the point of like artists in general, like it really starts thinking about like what really is love, because many of us, like, our understanding of love is like, before we get into all of these like deeper work, is really shallow. But then love is actually embracing both the suffering and also both the joys, and really embracing this entire emotional wave, right? And you can see with all of the favorite artists, right? A lot of us listen to Spotify, Apple Music, things like that. All of the favorite artists, they leaned into their vulnerabilities, and they really found the root of it and really just embraced it fully in the song, and then they project it out into the world, because they understand that this is part of the human suffering, or this is what connects us all as humans. And there's no point of fearing of like being separate from another person because like you're embarrassed of this, right? And rather, their abundance comes from just sharing their vulnerabilities. And that actually brings like the opposite effect of what the ego actually does not really understand and thinks that it's in it's not going to happen, is that literally just by projecting your vulnerabilities with others, others will connect with you rather than shaming you, right? Rather than blaming you. And if they do that, it means that they themselves probably have some kind of deeper trauma or inner work that they have to do. But most people, if we're connecting on a human level, they're really open to sharing their vulnerabilities and also the joys. And this is really what it means to be human.
Yeah.
Totally, totally. Yeah,
Wow.
and I think that is like another trauma that we need to go through. I guess another, um, position that we thought that, this is how we protect our image, how we create our image, that is like, and I think that is like the same as the hustling situation. Like we, it's a fake war that we have been fighting that has long ended, but no one tell us that hey, actually now it's like really the authentic self, right? To really feel, to really bring that feeling back, to serve, right? And serving is no longer a serving, like I serve other to get external validation, but it's serving from, I think Colin, you mentioned it, like from a full cup, right? From the love, that unconditional love at the end.
Nice. Yeah, wow. I also want to say something. So, oh man, there's so many things now. Yeah, you talk about connection, right? You talk about vulnerability, and somebody told me this quite recently, and I really resonated with it. So, if you want to gain trust from someone, the easiest way maybe is to ask for help, because you're basically showing vulnerability, right? I need your help, right? Imagine somebody, I mean, any one of us can imagine like somebody who is close to you, but they're always thinking that you have to be self-reliant. They feel bad to ask for help. Like, naturally, you can't deeply connect with that person, no matter what. Like, even if it's a family member, right? And so, like, we forget, like you said, the ego maybe is the one that's mainly in the way, but we forget that asking for help, even however successful you are, however accomplished you are, this is one of the best ways to connect with the people around you. And maybe there is a reason why people at the top, so to speak, are lonely, right? Because for them it's like think about it, like that example I gave about Jensen Huang. Like, if he went to a friend's or family dinner and he said, I have a problem, right? I have anxiety because I feel like I might fail, right? Or I'm going to be bankrupt. Like, obviously those people won't respond badly, but they might say something as a joke, like, oh my god, give me your problems. Like, you got nothing to complain about. And maybe that's maybe that didn't come from a bad space, but his reaction could be, oh man, yeah, I feel bad now. I don't think I'm going to share my problems with them because I'm just going to add to their burden. And that's why we become alone. But actually, it's to go beyond that, and recognize that they were also actually showing some level of vulnerability, right? Because they're saying, oh no, I'm not good enough. You're better than me. I can't help your problem. But then you just going back and saying, no, it doesn't matter if I have more money. It doesn't matter if I have more of this 3D world stuff. Like, we're all human. We're all souls. We all have lessons and things that we want to learn. And when we are able to show that vulnerability back, then we can have potentially a real connection. I think this is what I got. And then you talk about pattern formation, pattern breaking, and all that kind of stuff. I can give you again, let's go back more to the mind. I think it helps a lot for us. I can tell you a direct experiment that I've done on myself, right? So me and my doctors, we run some peptide experiment recently. So one of my doctors is a big size guy, he's like 120 kgs, 1.9 meters, and he started using some of these weight loss peptides. And I can tell you, like, within like 2 months, I saw him. I was like, "What happened to you?" Like, he lost like 30 kgs, right? But the irony is this. So, and I've tried it for myself just because I want to know what my patient is going to go through, right? What my client is going to go through. And I took the dose this week, and it basically suppresses your appetite so much. Like, whatever I used to eat, I eat like 10%, 20%. Secondly, it also activates your metabolism. So you actually burn more. And then it also activates one of these particular ones, it activates glucagon receptor, means it helps you burn fat as well. And actually, what I felt, which is first thing, was the environment around you, the input stimuli around you, is something that can be the beginning point to help you shift. It doesn't only have to come from inside, right? Our environments are so important. The people we hang out with, the people who we talk to, the people who basically influence how we talk, how we speak, how we think. This is really, really important. And for me, my realization was that I told my doctor, I said, I don't need this peptide. I know what it can do now. I don't need it because basically when I do my fasting or when I do some sort of dietary restriction, I'm going through the exact same experience, just without the lack of hunger. So the body is just going to give me a signal of hunger. I'll be like, okay, I don't need to eat now. I'm not going to die, I don't need to eat. And then your body starts to do the other things, which is burn the fat, which is conserve energy, which is all those things. And then after that, it unlocks energy again. And then after that, it will then send you the same signal again of hunger, of like, hey, maybe it's time to eat. And then maybe you just go back and say, hey, no, I'm not going to eat yet. I don't need it yet, right? Because we can't make a real life example of that anymore before we would just not have food. And so the body actually uses that input stimuli that is regular to actually do certain processes in the body, whether it's autophagy or whether it's some sort of cell maintenance. Now we are filled with at least food abundance. We are eating what 5 meals a day, 6 meals a day. You can eat anytime you want. Food is just a click away. And now we actually have to use conscious effort. Like you said, when you want to break a pattern, you have to use conscious effort to be aware of it and to change that pattern. And so I think in our world, certain things have become easier, obviously, because we have the tools, we have the support, we have the information. But in the same ways, because of the change of environment, some other things have become really difficult, like self-control in terms of food, self-control in terms of substances, self-control in terms of dopamine-inducing activities. This is where the difficulty lies. And actually, in essence, when you learn something from one field, you can actually apply those lessons to the other, right? For example, like there are people who are so good at making things happen, right? Whether they are entrepreneurs or businessmen. But then when you look at them, you say, how come they do not put any, not even close amount of their energy to their well-being and their health? Which sounds crazy, to be honest, when you see it that way. But it's because, like you said, the stories that we tell ourselves, the people that tell us these stories, these also form our identity. And it's not a true identity, because you put the example of Kobe Bryant is such a great example, because he was clearly a great athlete, a champion. And then when he retired, he said, I want to tell stories. And obviously, what did people first say? Oh, no, no, you're an athlete, don't dabble in this thing, you'll fail and all that. And he won what is it, a Grammy, right? Or Oscar, I can't remember, for his short film. So the whole idea of, we are also limited by our successes in that sense. Because those successes define us, right? So for example, let's say you're a successful businessman, you're a successful whatever, same songwriter, whatever those things is. When the day you decide, okay, I want to do something else, not because I want to give up on this, but because I want to explore that other side of me, you are going to be met with a lot of resistance, because people will be like, oh my God, why are you giving up such a great opportunity to continue to grow these things? And for myself, that is what I face, right? In a very real way, because when I sold the business, many of my friends, including some of the very top producers, they were like, why are you doing this? Why are you stopping? Why are you quitting? And I'm like, I'm not quitting. I'm just following what, where myself is bringing me to. And that I still maintain those relationships with them, because we don't connect through that thing only. One of the very famous producers and friends of mine, like when I sat with him, it was so funny. Where he was like, I'm going to drop by Singapore. Can we meet up? I was like, yeah, of course. And so we met up, and he just came back from like a 2-week cleanse in India. And he sat with me, and we just spoke about wellness, about mindfulness, about, how do we, optimize ourselves to feel better. And at the end of the conversation, he said, oh my God, this is such a great, this was such a great conversation, that we can connect on something else. And I feel like this is something that to some people obviously can be a scary thing, a fear, or even a fearful thing, because for so many years we have defined ourselves as that thing, that successful person in that field. And when we say that we drop that role, for example, or we drop that mask or that part of ourselves, the first fear is that, who are we? Right? And I think that is in essence some part of that journey, right? How do we look at and be aware. I think again the awareness of what do we shape ourselves to be. It could be the product of some parts of our environment, the people that we hang out with, the things that we like to do, and all those things. Again, when we go back into that present, like you said, all these are the past. When we go back into the present and we sense this future as well, I think that helps a lot of us because we seem to be people that like to look at this so-called new world, new future, whatever you want to call it, but also not fall into the trap of living in that future. Because for that future to happen, we must live in the present. To bring that imagination, to bring that inspiration from the future and the lessons from the past, and say, what new decisions can I make today? And if you continue to do that, I'm almost certain that the future will happen. Maybe not in the form that we expect, but basically it will happen.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And Colin, I want to add on to when you were sharing. There's one word come to mind that actually sit across everything, every transformation that we are experiencing, and I think the word is knowledge. Why I said that, like, if you think about it, where from wellness, why do we fear, like why do we eat the bad food, why do we have this like bad habits that create a health problem? A lot of the time is because we are not knowledgeable into the details of like what how the makeup of our health, our gut, right? And I think knowledge rather is in putting it into the wellness, rather is like using tool to have the self knowledge of ourself, right? That when we at the beginning we talk about human design and gene key, that is also knowledge about self, knowledge and knowledge. And when what is a so-called successful person is also they have the knowledge expertise in their field that make them like who they are. Like, so I think that if I have to summarize one thing, that when we have fear or when we reject certain idea, I think the first thing is that do I have to actually even have the knowledge to make an opinion, right? If I don't have the knowledge to reject certain things, then the step is not like, oh, I don't like it because most likely, if we dive into why I didn't like it or why I don't like it, it's because of an assumption, a belief that we may have made, or someone imposed onto us since our whole life without proper knowledge. So I think that is one key way to start our breakthrough, is that through when we notice an assumption, when we reject something, like ask ourselves, do we have the knowledge to actually say clearly why I don't want certain things or why I want certain things? And it go both way, right? Both belief and disbelief is like, do we actually have the right knowledge to make that statement? And once we have that knowledge, then it becomes conscious to say, yes, I can do that, or no, I don't like it. And that apply across everything you mentioned.
Nice.
Yeah, I think with also like more on your point on all of these feelings in general and like what you cling at, especially like the fears that you have, is like I think one really good way to know whether to lean in or to know something's a distraction is really, again, it goes back to listening to your own body and really understanding your emotions. Because for example, if there are things which you can cut off, at least from my experience, where there really isn't an emotional damage or emotional toll to it, then most likely it just means that it's a distraction and there really isn't much you should look into. It's just something that brings you out of focus. But then if you realize that you cut something, but then there's some kind of desire that constantly comes back up to you, then it means that there's something in there. There's some kind of essence or there's something that your body is telling you. So you should kind of dive deeper into what it is and figure out like what your body needs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What are some example, like I think maybe can we like how for people that are not right ready or not somatically attuned, how do we start?
I think okay. I'm just gonna start it off. I think
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
one huge factor that I think is really the most easiest, at least for me, to test is I think nutrition and just food in general, like what you intake. I think that's definitely the one of the most conscious choices you can make. For example, for me, I've been trying to integrate more of like a vegetarian diet and trying to limit my meat intake, and also testing out different things such as like I have like a whole list of food that I just don't eat. Most of them are artificial. I basically don't eat carbohydrates anymore, and even if I do, it's only going to be like small intakes, and it's going to be carbs which are organic, for example, like rice, potatoes, things like that. And what I've found is that even though my mind is trying to stick to this, there are still times when I just eat a whole lot of veggies and eat all of these good food, and still my body feels like I'm not filled, and it's like a body yearning for like more and more food, even though I intake a lot of these good foods. So what I have to do is go back and test it with other foods. So for example, I started eating again protein, even though I know that these foods are more dense. It might just mean that your body needs it during that moment, because if you're consciously aware that your stomach is literally rumbling and there's some kind of desire there, then you should listen to that instead of clinging back onto the mental model that something is dense, even though that may spark some judgment. But again, that's a problem, right? You're judging it. And the whole point of this work is going back to the natural self, going back to the higher self. And part of that is also listening to what your physical body needs.
Yeah, that's so true. Like I myself gone through this cleansing and then judgment phase and then back to like what actually our body really needs, right? But for you, Bosco, like you probably need a lot more protein also because of your growing age.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? But like for me it was my journey of food, and it's actually also really tied into the somatic. It does, like, but it's so natural somehow. And for me it's like through when I start meditate 6 years ago, consistently, like at some point, and it was like so natural. First thing that it dropped off in my diet is alcohol. It's not that I like, oh, because alcohol, like according to what whatsoever, that is bad for me, but it's just like my body naturally start to reject it, right? And it gives me like massive headache that I can't get away like for like 24 hours or more. So to a point that it's like I have to make a judgment, like make a trade-off. Do I want my headache or do I stop drinking, right? But that is a natural body reaction, right? Then the next body reaction is that very similar to you, Bosco. Is like I start to like trade off, like to start eating a lot less meat, and then and I actually test the body. Then what if I go to strict vegan, right? So no animals products, and not because of any religion or health reason, but it's like actually it's like a I just want to test myself, like
Yeah,
it's like a scientist of my own body. What would that looks like? Can I actually survive without animals products? And it seems reasonable. And I think the muscle mass has reduced, like because like I think the problem eventually is still like no matter how much plant-based protein I took, it feels like it's something is still missing that the meat product actually gave me. So then I kind of switch back to a more balanced diet, eating like some meat and a lot of veggies and etc. But it's go through that process, and through that process, I what I learned is to learn to how see how my body feel, right?
Yeah.
And every day, and kind of take note of what is my energy level, right? And how's my skin and everything. And I think that is actually a very um, measurable way to start to learn to listen to the body. So I think that's good. So I think I've gone through the diet journey as well, back and forth, and find that balance. Oh, and one thing that I actually noticed that is then a lot of us start to label ourselves like, oh, I'm a vegan, I'm a vegetarian, I'm pescatarian. I don't know how many layers that we have now.
Yeah.
But that labeling is very, for me, is so unhelpful, because then while we kind of align to a, like, kind of stick to a identity, again, there's an external label, right? But like, if for us, that uniquely for me, right, I might be very specific in how that the what type of food that is good for me. That's no label, like, to talk about that. So I think that eventually all this labeling, all this category, as we all of us become more aware of self, those labels start to fall apart, that we should not actually subscribe to any label. The only label that I should have for me is me. It's my diet, right? And whoever that might resonate, right? But they will actually just have a similar guideline, but they will find their own that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I
it's
just want to.
crazy that. Yeah. Do you want to chime in? But Bosco, go for it.
Yeah, I'll be quick.
Yeah, go for it.
I just want to talk, yeah, more about like the labeling thing. Is like, if we dive deeper into like why we label things, is because we want our minds want certainty,
Yes.
right? And our minds also wants things to be static, because when things are static, then you're certain that it's going to happen. But then that contrasts the whole principle of life. And one of the huge things is that you'll realize that nothing is static. Everything is changing from the quantum level to what you can see visibly. Everything changes. Like that's literally a life principle. So what instead we need to do is be able to adapt to those changes and begin embracing those changes. And sometimes that means that you have to dive into the uncertainty and really accept that your body will eventually change. So like, life is all about learning, right? Like, you never stop learning, and once you stop learning, then it means that you're going to start encountering potentially lots of problems, because you're breaking the laws of what life is, at least to be a human in this form. Yeah, Colin, sorry to interrupt you, but
No, no, you good. That was a great sharing as well. No, I was just saying it's so funny that all of us have gone through this experimentation with the diet. I did the same. Went through the vegan thing, went through the carnivore thing, and then. But you're right. As you go through that journey, you actually become more attuned to your body, because when you, like you said, when you put a label on yourself and you do that for a while, after a while you feel like your might still be lacking something, and so if you listen to yourself, you will start to adjust. And yeah, it was not easy for me for sure, because what again we talk about pattern, right? What the label I put on myself that helped me heal, for example, in the initial phase, might not serve me now. So I have to relinquish it, but it's hard because it's like, but it served me, it gave me, it healed me, it helped me get to this place. And but how do we recognize um, that this pattern doesn't serve you anymore? I think this is really quite challenging. And obviously, the more you do it, the better it gets, right? The more awareness, the more observational skills you have, the more sensitivity you have, is gonna make it easier. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think it sounds like, all of us, what, a common theme is that this self discovery, self mastery journey, at the end of the day, the community that we need to be in is like, it has to be like so open that everything's go. Like, the belonging is no belonging at all, but that because of that, that is the belonging, if that makes sense, right? Because otherwise, like, we will fall keep falling into a category like of something, and when we're so deep into it, then you feel bad to get out of it, right? As well. So how do we be like open and agile enough to be in a space that is everything's like eventually we become like so unique that and so comfortable that I belong to myself, and who am I becoming is uniquely me, and I honor myself and everyone else, and their differences. Then that's the I think that would be the ultimate belong.
The dog wants to join our conversation, I think.
He has an opinion.
Yeah. It's like, listen to me, guys. But yeah. No, no, I also like the one you shared about, like, the labels, how we like to basically quantify it, structure it, so that it's predictable, so that it's certain, right? Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a habit that we all have, given our society as well. We want things that are measurable. Think about school, right? We want to. You can sort of not really measure creativity. It's pretty tough. But you can measure, like, on a test, you can measure in how good somebody has of memorization skills, for example, and all those type of things. And I guess that's a form of intelligence for sure. But again, given the world we are today, the first question I asked myself when I was in uni was when I was learning chemical engineering. I was like, it's about applying the knowledge, right? Isn't it? But why in the test I have to memorize 50 equations? If I go down to become a chemical engineer in industry, I'll have a computer and books to refer to for the equations. The hard part is how to solve it. So for me, it's like, why wouldn't you not make the test harder, for example, and then see who can apply? Of course, again, maybe there are other issues that will come up, but the real point is that a lot of things that we learn in this life soon will not be applicable. You don't have to memorize stuff. The information is there. Well, the real focus now is on application, right? If you can use this, it doesn't even matter if you have no experience in something. If in one day or in a period of time you can download this information into you and integrate it into some sort of wisdom knowledge, and then you can apply it, you will be the expert, right? Just like somebody can start a company in rockets when he wasn't a rocket, you know, a rocket scientist. I mean, those are the limitations we put on ourselves. As this reality shows us that these limitations are no longer holding us back, then we go back to the same question again: who is the limiting step? Who is the limiter? It's you. That's it. Your choice.
Totally. It feels like that, like if I from everything that we talked about is to really get to the core is that we we're in an era where there is no more buffer of people telling us our identity or what's the meaning of our life. It really must get to that we must act on find like really like discovering our unique ability right through our body, our emotions, like and those are all information. Like emotion is information, feeling is information, like our somatic reaction is information that we never like really use. But now we really actually have to pay attention and use it to discover ourselves because that is really the way forward. Like when um, AI take over most of the task and skill that that we might be performed and in exchange of money that but now it's like okay there's only one thing it's our own uniqueness and our own creativity that can save us.
Actually, I want to bring up this topic because I just I saw a little documentary about Rupert Murdoch, and actually it's again about pattern recognition, right? We talk about pattern recognition. So Rupert Murdoch, I mean, I think most people know, very successful business guy, right, in media, and he has a very big pattern of betrayal in his life, right? So from young, he was born into wealth. He had like 10 servants, live in a house with 30 rooms in 1930, right? And his father was already a guy in media and gave all of his inheritance to him basically to take over. But however, the father's business associates decides to sell and dissolve most of the empire at that point. And so he spent a good however many years, 30, 40 years of his initial life to make up for that, to prove them wrong, right? So he got betrayed, and he's like, and that gave him, uh, actually taught him about resilience, taught him about that you can rely on yourself, you can build something from scratch. But then when he got there, he didn't let go of that. He still was holding on to that betrayal pattern.
Like the soldier.
Yeah, and that betrayal pattern basically it infused in the rest of his life, in his families. For example, all his kids now are basically fighting against each other for who is going to rule. I mean, we saw, the show Succession. It's basically exactly a mirror of his family and his life. And the sad part is that this betrayal pattern is being passed down, right? It doesn't matter how much wealth, how much power, and all these things that they have. Actually, what he really wanted was connection and love. But because of this betrayal pattern, I think the first big challenge for him was like when he divorced his second wife, which is the mother of three of his kids. He then dated this Chinese lady, right? And at that time, the whole family was against it, right? Obviously, the ex-wife, obviously the kids, and he in his mind, I can only imagine what he could have felt, which is, I created this wealth and power. I wish that people would love me for who I am, not just the wealth and the power. And the persons that he hoped that the most are his closest people, his children, right? And the fact that his children couldn't accept his choices because he wanted to be happy for himself, so he chose somebody else, for example, and they rejected him. And so, in essence, um, there is a real reason why maybe he can't connect deeply with his children anyways, because this betrayal pattern is standing against it. It's not that he doesn't love them; it's just that he can't see it and can't feel it. And so it obviously in this case it's uh it's very obvious, right? Because it's like if you already have all these things, why wouldn't you focus on these things that would potentially give you fulfillment and give you joy and give you happiness? But because they focus on the things that are predictable, he knows that he can grow his empire. He knows he has control over his businesses and they are measurable. If he did this and he failed, he wouldn't even know whether he passed. And that's the first point. Because it's just about feelings, and with feelings is not known. You have to actually be vulnerable, like we said. We need to actually ask those questions, like even if they're our family members. Like it's not easy, or even friends. Like we know these situations, like I have to come into awareness of it, right? And also be honest with it, right? Like sometimes I'm very triggered by a friend, but I know I care about this friend a lot. I don't want to admit it at that moment for sure, because I'm like, damn, I just want to put down the phone, I want to leave, right? But then I ask myself, I could do that and maybe I'll feel better. But that's not me, right? For me, it's like I need to tell my truth. And if I care about this person, even if they trigger me, I'm gonna, instead of trying to be the one that's right, or the one that wins the argument, I take another step back and I say, no, I'm just gonna tell this person what I feel, which is I care about you. I'm very triggered by you. But all I wanted to tell this person was that instead of saying I'm right, instead of saying maybe there's other perspectives, I just told them that, you know, if you need me, I'm here. That's it. When they're ready, and I think this is the key point, right? And this is the difficult one that I've been integrating, is that we do all this self-help, the self-growth and all this type of stuff, and we do change our life. And of course, us being us, we want to help all the people around us to be on their best level as well. But the irony is that everyone has their own path and everyone has their own pace. And it's not always for us to try to accelerate them, to push them. And the irony is when you push them, you actually push them away. You push them back. And if you are patient and you can sit with that pain, sit with that emotion, that is what they actually need. And that will be the fastest way.
I really love what you've brought up because that sparked a whole conversation, another topic on relationships in general.
Wow. Okay.
Because I've contemplated a lot about my relationship with, especially my parents, because I mean, I've been with them for 17 years, nearly 18 soon in a month.
Yeah.
And like one big thing is like we have a lot of conflict all the time in the past. And in the past, I would all the time lash out on them. I would be angry at them, or I would just repress, right? There's two sides of it. Either you're going to be reactive to something or you're going to suppress it inside of you depending on your characteristics in general. And one thing that I really like that you've mentioned is how it's all about letting that person know your genuine feeling. But then if we break it down into more micro pieces, what do we do during the moment when they trigger you or when you have that heavy emotion? And really the solution to that is to validate them, even though it may seem defensive in the moment for yourself. Like your ego can't take the validation. But then once you understand that the reason why they're mad at you is because they're in their emotional waves, or they also have some kind of fear or some kind of trauma that they've gone through in the past, and it's just not themselves, then you also start to see that you also have your that patterns inside yourself, right? You also sometimes lash out at people. You have bad days. You have days when you're just not feeling like it, and it's more likely for you to react to things. So what acceptance and what compassion really means is to validate that person during that moment, and then afterwards when all of the emotions calm down, then you could bring up your genuine feelings. And I found that to be super helpful, especially now or these past few months whenever I'm having any conflicts, or actually I realize my conflicts decrease a lot from this, right? You start to accept that, yes, I'm here as a person. I am listening to you. I acknowledge that you have this emotion. And maybe during that moment, I did not do something in the best way that I've done it. But from that, then later on, like this person will also start to eventually transform the entire relationship. They'll start to realize that if they were being too mean to you, then they themselves will also show some compassion in the relationship and show that they may have mistaken during that moment, and start to acknowledge and build that awareness. And I think this is really useful, especially for relationships where you may be the only one looking into this, right? But then you don't want to force someone else to look at it because maybe they're not ready or they're busy with something else. This is a really effective way to help not only yourself, but also help the other person in like a two-way beneficial relationship.
That's amazing. That's like a very wise way, like how to deal with parents actually. So, Bosco, I'm actually curious. What is an example? Like if someone asks you if
Mm.
they have this situation, if your peers come to you, I have this situation. What exactly you said to your parents? Like, what would be an example that actually create this new flow?
Mm. I guess an example would be like if my parents would get mad at me because I'm not doing the dishes, or I'm not helping out, or I'm not cooperating, then rather than telling them that I'm too busy or telling them why I'm not helping and like lashing out your emotions, what I instead would do is I would cooperate with them. Right? Initially, like if you don't like before we understood this might seem like a defensive move. You're like succumbing to their commands, but then by doing that, you're validating them, like you're validating their feelings, and then afterwards, then once all of the tension comes down, then if you feel like you're like, if I feel like I'm in an unjust position when that criticism was made, then I would probably start sparking a conversation with my parents and tell them, hey mom, hey dad, I felt like what you said to me was a bit unfair. And then that would help kind of spark at least some kind of understanding, or letting that person like know your feelings. But especially like when you're young, most of the time like your parents are more wise or
I think.
so like it's again like it comes back down to like understanding whether or not someone else is making the mistake or whether or not you are the one making the mistake. And most of the time it depends on situation to situation.
No, this is very, very great example. And I think to your point though, right, like that is another belief that we all think that the older the people are, the wiser they are. And I think that equation has proven to be wrong over and over and over and over again. And some, like have been shown in the public stage. So I think that age and wisdom does not is not equal, and I think that is like, but like but I really like how you use it as a strategy, right? To kind of step one, step two approach, and that works well. I think in all of life. So great
Yeah,
example.
yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely feel that because when I look at my kid, I'm like, seriously, sometimes I gotta take a double take because it's like they know so much more than us. She teaches me more than I would expect. They innately know these things. And obviously, the sense at some level is that I'm just trying to not get in the way. You know what I mean? Like if I do certain things, or I put her in certain environments that forces her or him to do certain things, in essence, an intelligent being will adapt, right? So we adapted in our situation. We adapted. Okay, the mind is rewarded, for example. Following the rules is rewarded, for example. And those are parts of us. Don't get me wrong, but that's not all of us. And I think what we are in the process of, we already had when we were young. Yeah, unfortunately or fortunately, that was the lesson that we need to learn. So the environment we are in forced us into this situation where we have an opportunity now to learn about ourselves. And so these children in the future, their learning will be different. Will be, I mean, honestly, it will be of higher consciousness because all the things are already abundant in the 3D world, right? If they already, it's not about money or wealth. It's like abundant in the sense that I feel like if I need something, I can create it. And so then it will be, the next challenge will be, what do I want to create, not what can I only create. And that is such a difficult thing to wrap your head around. I mean, even for me, it's, I don't understand all of it for sure, right? But when you're born in an environment that is literally abundant, there is no other reality. Right? So for them,
Yeah,
it's so true. They don't even question it, right? And for us, I guess, in essence, and that is also a very important role that we play, is the bridge. We are playing the bridge, right? Because we know the world of the past, right? Which was more certain, which was more predictable. You work for a company for X a number of years, and then you'll be taken care of or whatever. And then we are like in the in between phase, right? We've seen the internet, we've seen AI. Soon, maybe we'll see autonomous robots. And so we stand in the confluence of many revolutions. Most generations that have passed would have only seen one in their lifetime. We have already seen maybe three.
yeah,
And so, in essence, we play the ultimate bridge, if you want to say, because everything that comes after this change they only know that. They only know abundance, they only know immediacy, they only know instantaneous change. And there is a wisdom not of the past, and of course what we have gone through, the essence of that wisdom, not to copy. Like, for example, what I thought about when you said all those things was about community. Because when we go through these things, we might be the only one in our friendship circle or whatever. But soon we will not be. Soon it will be normal. But just like anything new, some people need to be first. And those are the hardest ones, right? And it's okay to pat yourself on the back and say, fine, I'm going to be the first one, right? But that we're not alone. I mean, I think the most important thing that I figured out in the last year is that we're not alone. Like, I always thought, coming from a place like Singapore, most people are just very pragmatic and all these things. They won't want to think about all these other less tangible, less certain things. But the irony is that I'm wrong. There are so many of us out there. And if and I sense, just from this podcast, what is emerging is some sort of global community, right? In the deeper sense, not because we align only because we like certain things, but the essence of it, right? That we are all going through this self-discovery journey to learn more about ourselves. And the best part is when we do it in a community, we learn so much faster, because just in this podcast, I'm sure for me, I've learned so much from both of you. Like, and the things you said actually bring things up from me. So yeah, I have this strong sense that community is something that is calling to many of us, in this space at least.
Yeah, totally agree. What do you think, like in the community, how, like, what type of support people needs most, or like you need most, that is actually useful and it's not just for the sake of community that people come in and like how can we incorporate it into some like a daily things that like actually is useful for people?
Yeah, yeah. So maybe we can use a current format, right? Like, again, there's always wisdoms in the past, right? So you look at a structure like, again, maybe sounds contentious, but you look at a structure like religion. You look at a structure like, maybe it could be secular as well. It could be a community center or something like a neighborhood district center or something. The key point is that you have this gathering point of people, right? We as people in this world, we have needs, right? So why do people go to a church, right? Other than the fact that they receive certain things, but they also have community. They receive community by being part of it. So I think the whole idea is that all of us seek connection at some level, right? In our modern day, we have been pushed into a situation that might be closer to solitary. We are more solitary. We're like, we got to handle our own stuff. Like, even in Singapore, people don't. I'm sure in Hong Kong it's probably similar. Like, people don't live with their extended family anymore, right? In our cultures, I think before it was quite common that you would live in the similar vicinity, whether it's the uncles, the aunties. We don't have that anymore. And increasingly, even the young people, I mean, have a desire to live on their own, to have their own independence. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there is a value to that as well. But the whole idea is that you can have independence and also community. You don't have to only choose one or the other. And I think this is, as we found our self-expression, as we found our individualism in the Asian context at least, now it's coming full circle, right? We're coming back into, we also want community, because our unique experiences and perspectives are different from another culture, right? So as much as we speak English, as much as we consume Western media, we also have our own unique experience and interpretation of that within our context. And so the community in essence is not one that's, what I feel is emerging is not one that's bounded only by certain set shared beliefs or even shared cultures. It's going to be beyond those borders. Of course, it can start somewhere more fundamental, right? By the end of the day, is truly what we have been saying, right? Which is all these things that we learn, whoever created any of these tools, um, how come it can apply to all humans? Because there is a deep fundamental similarity that we all share, right? Consciousness, maybe that's what it is. Yes.
Yes. You are me, I am you.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is that there are lessons to take from the past. At least the structures and how they operate, right? The Roman Empire is called the Roman Catholic Church because and they were pagans, right? So they saw the structure of the Catholic Church and they said that is a great way to organize a society. And so, in the same way, can we learn the same? We can use a current structure, adapt it to the other outcomes that we want, and implement it. You don't have to remake the will, so to speak, right? So
Mhm.
I sense there's something that we can learn from that past, and in Singapore especially, I'm trying to get this moving, right? So, for example, the government here is very supportive of like community, um, like events and activities. So, for example, like in every district, like there's like a community center. Um, you can literally, as an individual, go up there and say, "I want to host community gathering events for this district," and they'll just give you funding. Like not that difficult. So
Mhm.
the whole idea is like we can use current structures to distribute this new form, so to speak. So I think that's what I'm experimenting with.
Mm.
But yeah,
I think, yeah, like, in terms of community, I think one very important aspect that I will see coming towards like the future is more about how people interact in the community, because a lot of the times when we think about these different like religious institution, there's always like someone like for example in um Christianity, there's like when you go to a church, there's always like a priest up there
yeah,
who's always reciting and being the one who's like the leader, and then everyone else behind you is kind of just following along. But the problem with that is a lot of the times that just sparks like echo chambers, and you're not really seriously thinking about how it applies to your own life, right? We're just
totally.
unconsciously reciting stuff. So what I envision as like a community is more of like people guiding others by asking questions, right? Because like questions is such a super powerful thing to help you reflect upon things. For example, just asking generic questions on what does the meaning of love mean to you, because everyone's meaning of love is different. And then finding the people who resonate with you to do that with, and then also for the person who is asking the question, then after you hear about like their experiences, then you can probably validate it based on their truth self, right? Based on what is actually their higher self. So I think this is like one thing that I've noticed with like a lot of the readings that I have with people who've been doing it for like 30 or 40 years, no matter in astrology, human design, gene keys, is when I like their structure of how they actually read once they start to realize that everything is all about the self knowledge, is that they won't actually tell you what exactly you need to do. It's more
Yeah,
like they guide you through a question
yeah,
process,
yeah, yeah,
and then you are like a sounding board,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you kind of tell them, and then they will feedback back to you, so then you can gain clarity. And I think that is something that we need to start to look more into, is to number one, how can we look more into ourselves? And also number two, how can we guide others without placing our limitations, or guide them in a way where it allows them to open up themselves and find their own personal truth rather than implanting our own belief systems.
Totally, totally. I think the best analogy I have is the analogy of a coach. Or a parent is the same because you can guide them, you can give them advice, you can give them perspectives, but you can't play the game for them. So we don't interfere and play other people's games, right?
Yeah, well, I think on top of that, that even though the guiding and the knowledge is also so even a lot of the current coach, like, and it's also, I would say that it's still up to our own interpretation. Then I catch myself the same way. Sometimes I would do the same, but really have to how to balance to the point of what Bosco is saying. Like in the ideal world, is
Mm.
actually there is not even a framework. Like the only framework would be questioning, right? It's like it's all about like whatever your framework, how you come up with your truth would be you to be right. And how and can we actually create a community and a society that actually be that open,
Yeah,
that there is love, but there is 7 billion
yeah,
definition of love.
yeah,
There's 8 billion
yeah,
definition of
yeah,
love. There is 8 billion definition of what the truth is, what the universe is, and everything. Right? I think that when children are very young, right, I think there might be some framework that like basic, teach you ABCD. Basically, we have to teach them how to communicate in the earth on earth, like because that. But once the communication skill is formed, then I think everything else would be kind of up for grabs.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I feel like there's a good analogy here. Like, think about an orchestra, right? Right. All of us are unique music, unique instruments. And however, how does the orchestra work together? Even though there might be so-called less structure, especially like think about a band or think
More like a
about
jazz.
jazz. Like when they're riffing or like improv comedy. Like how do you find some sort of, like you said, there is no much framework. It's uncertain. There's no framework, but somehow there's harmony.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's what we're searching for. And part of that discussion, at least today, is that same like if you want to harmonize, you must know your own sound.
You can't
Right?
pick someone else. Like,
If you don't know your sound, there's no way you can harmonize with some other sound
yeah,
because you don't even know what you produce. So I think, in essence, I would say part of that self-discovery journey is the basis. There's some basis there to create this community, and the community in itself, if everyone has this deep understanding that we are all, like you said, we are all the same, right? Conscious souls, whatever you want to call it. And at that level, on that plane, we are, in some sense, not only the same, from the same, are the same, and in the true essence, the same, right? So there is no hierarchy there, right? That's what you're noticing. There is no hierarchy there. There's not
yeah,
somebody who is the leader perpetually. We take turns, so to speak, in a literal sense as well,
yeah.
right? And so in this community, it's about each sovereign soul saying that I have a unique gift, and how can we share these gifts? And these gifts, the sharing of this process will activate others' gifts as well.
Yes,
And building onto that actually orchestra analogy, I think something interesting if you dive into even like a deeper level is that
Yeah,
like you can see, for example, in like the string section, right? Like there's violinists, there's people playing the cello. And what you notice with the violinists is that even though on the surface it might seem that their instruments are the same, but if you
yeah,
dive deeper into the quality of like the the strings, or if you dive into like the wood of the base of the violin, you realize that it's actually not the same because
yeah,
all of these strings and all of these woods come from different trees, right? So and they're processed in very different ways. And I know we're going very deep, but in this kind
yes,
of shows how again it's like there is a same essence on the surface, but then deep down everyone is individual, right? Everyone is differentiated in some way, and it's so important to figure out what this differentiation is.
yeah. And human design gives us a very very clear sort of answer or position to that, right? Because twins can be born, they can share the same DNA, but they can have different human design, right? So what else? I mean, like nearly all the variables have been set. So how can they be so different? There is something that is different. Like you said, the wood. the string, the feeling of that person at that day, right? Like literally moment to moment, it could change. Even yourself, moment to moment, you're expressing a different version of yourself, so to speak. So, and in itself, that is value, that is wisdom, because that is how consciousness wants to observe itself, right? By making infinite different versions of itself. For example, some of us on this earth and some in some other places potentially. But the whole point is that, right, we talk about energy. Energy is information, right? We know that, right? E equals mc squared, right? So if information increases, means more lives, more experiences increase. Wouldn't that mean that energy increases?
Mhm. That's amazing. Yeah, yeah. And like even when there's like from every angle that we look at life and our human experience, it's all like it's really aligned like how things are moving, right? It makes so much sense from rather it's from industrial revolution and then the internet come on board, right? And then the social media comes on board, right? And then now AI come on board. It actually it lead us to a point that actually it kind of break down the separation, right? I was like having a conversation with someone, and then he was surprised by what I expressed. That actually we become more similar, right? And it brings social media and Netflix and everything. It brings us together. That like in the past we all watch our own movie and TV shows just in our countries, right? And then now, right, everyone same like across the world, right, will love K-pop, right, or Demon Hunter or whatever that is, right? So it becomes so universally aligned, and then the other side, the person will say, well, but that actually is like losing. The cultural like the aspect of it like for that individual culture, is that a bad good thing or bad thing, right? And I think there's no good and bad. It's just because that's just part of the evolution, right? The tradition culture is just part of the belonging. Now just the belonging get expanded and get bigger and bigger. And if you look at that trend, then eventually it's natural the entire humanity is one belonging, right? Then it closest to the like collective consciousness and oneness that we can talk about. But then that also prepare ourselves, right, to maybe something else. Like if humanity as one, right, there might be start some like that. What is the non-human form that coming in that we might preparing ourselves. So if you say like it's not predicting the future, but you kind of see that trend why we are naturally pushing along that way, right? Which also means something else will happen, and that for me, in my mind, it seems logical. I mean, other people might not, but it's just like for me, it's just like this is so logical to me that that's kind of how it will evolve.
I like that point on culture, and I think if we want to look at it in a similar way as well, it's like if you really ask what culture is, like like if you just seriously sit down for a bit and just ask yourself what is culture, right? I mean, the first thing that comes up to me is like the collective essence of culture, or culture must have arts and performances in it. And once you start to realize that these are the essence, then you start to see that what you actually think culture has disappeared has actually not disappeared. It just evolved in a different form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's like the essence is there, but it's just what we label, like goes back to labeling point on what culture is.
Exactly, exactly. And then become like a collective culture at some point, and that's just part of our evolution.
Nice. Okay, I guess we shall wrap. What do you reckon?
Uh,
I need to go
le-
soonish.
yeah. I
How,
don't think.
how what is our collective, like what is the summary, right? Like
Yeah, I was gonna say like
everything that we
maybe we
talked
can
about.
say like maybe the one of the like the big takeaway or something like that. And yeah, I think something along those lines would work. That's usually what I do.
Or should we just take turns, or do we
Yeah, I think we can
definitely
take
need to
it.
take
Take
turns?
turns.
Yeah.
Whoever's ready.
Yeah, because we all have a different way of thinking, so we
Mm-hmm.
kind of fit into the community
Right, that's right.
conversation.
That's right. Mm. Okay, I can go first. So I think first of all, I want to say like this has been such a invigorating conversation with you guys. Like just from the first conversation we had, I felt there was something here, right? And we talked about a lot of things that are very close to me today. Um, I guess maybe the last point that we said right about community. I think in essence, what I felt, what I've experienced in the last year, and in this, and in interacting with both of you, is that the whole idea of community, yes, there is some sort of structure that is going to be created to gather people, but that in itself is not the most important part, right? The fact that when once gathered, everyone has their own sense. Like we gravitated to each other, and then we decided to do a podcast, for example. And maybe we'll continue to interact in a deeper sense, or maybe not. But the whole idea is that we trust our sense to know who, instead of the predefined measure of like, hey, you guys gather together, and you guys are at the same level, so you gather together. It should be it should be free form, you know. Like you choose who you gravitate, because if you trust that sense, and we've been learning about that, trusting your heart, trusting your gut, all those things. There is a reason why you gravitate. There is some lesson there. There's some, I don't know, gift exchange, whatever, any of those things. Or maybe if we use human design, then we say, oh, the other person has the other gate, right? Or the other gene key that we are meant to see, or something like that. Yeah, I feel like we need to trust ourselves more. I think that is my takeaway. And yeah, I'm so glad to have these great conversations with both of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin. I can go next. Yes, definitely. I think this conversation opened up so much. What I want to share, with the community and the world as well, is I think we start from the human design path, right, talking about gene key a little bit, right? But all of this is kind of, and then is about this self discovery, self knowledge, and I think that my key takeaway with everything here, as to summarize, is like once we have the knowledge about self and about why we have certain assumption decisions, then we start to really build up our uniqueness and why, and then it actually bring back the meaning of life and why we are who we are, right? And a lot of people ask like, what is my purpose in life and what's the meaning of life? Actually, like, is to seek out what who am I think that is back to the key point, because the whole thing about our soul and our life is to experience life in our unique way. That is the meaning and the purpose of life. There is nothing else outside that. There is not like an external thing, I must be XYZ. Is that it's just everyone express it differently, right? The some is like Kobe Bryant with basketball, right? Taylor Swift with singing, right? Everyone is different and we express it certain way. Ah, so, and with that, then now we understand this. Then how do we have a new way, a new type of community, right? That's the old system and the old structure no longer work. That is like an external telling us what we are. Now we is like we telling ourselves what we are. Then naturally we will need a new form of community that actually support this type of growth, this type of self-discovery, and so allow us to become the best version of ourselves. So I think that kind of wrap up what our whole conversation, like between how we discover, how we interact with other people, what's our relationship, but it's all back to this, like how can we support each other go through this phase of our new beginning.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ryan and Colin, for those synthesis. And I mean, you guys touch a lot on the points, which I definitely want to bring up. And at least my biggest takeaway is have fun. And I think that's a really generic one. So I don't want to end it like that. I want to definitely go more deeper in what having fun means. And I think having fun just means embracing both ends of the emotional spectrum. So this means when your body feels upset, you really go into that upsetness and just let it be there. And then when you're also very happy, then you also fully embrace it. And it's like, then what does the mind do? Like, what's the mind's role? Then it really is just to enjoy the ride, like enjoy and just laugh at yourself when you trip up. And even though during that moment you're feeling super upset, when you look back at it, it's like it's important to just detach from it. And I think thoughts play a really important mechanism. It's like whatever you think, it's eventually going to manifest out. So it's so important to just continue thinking positive thoughts no matter what happens. And even though like you might have a conversation with someone and you might not get a lot out of it, or if you don't want to do particular things, and you still have to realize that everything is necessary for a reason. And it's like it really comes back down to the mind, right? Like this whole thing I think is more about how can we balance the mind and emotions and our body. And because we've been trained so much in our lives to use our mind, is like all
Only.
of this, yeah, only our minds, is like all of this really helps at least quiet our minds a bit, so then we can reconnect with the whole entire balance of mind, spirit, emotions, and physical self.
Amazing.
So yeah, I think
Beautiful.
it's a really nice way to wrap up the podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, wishing you all the best, whoever's watching, and both you, Colin and Ryan, as well. As
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah. No, thank you so much, and hope wish the best for everyone.